What's up, guys? We are back with another Masters of the Universe Masterverse review, jumping into yet another new subline, subsection of Masterverse. We're taking a look at something very, very different today because this new wave has the Netflix CGI MOTU figures. So we're taking a look at the Netflix CGI He-Man. Of course, you know, this show is just called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and this is a weird looking figure. Of course, this show is very stylized, it's very different. I like this show, I'm a big fan of it. Some of the current stuff is pretty wild, but I'm really curious to see how this very top-heavy design has translated into figure form. Now, he still comes in the same style package that we're used to for Masterverse, a sort of trapezoidal shape. You've got the big window with the figure, you've got the Netflix logo down there on the bottom, 40th anniversary call out, and then we've got artwork on the spine and the back showing He-Man in front of the Netflix Grayskull, cross-sell for this wave, and then a bio for this particular version of He-Man. So let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, our Masterverse Netflix CGI He-Man. This is, I mean, let's be honest, this is a really weird figure. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, it's just a weird figure. This is a crazy, super stylized, very accentuated, disproportionate He-Man. Skeletor is, of course, the exact same, and as a result, the figure is that way. So, like, gorilla arms, big barrel chest, but like normal proportions from sort of the abs down. And then they've got relatively small heads. I know that's kind of been a thing for this line in general, but they actually should have small heads here. What's really weird, though, is that they don't really work any differently from a normal Masterverse figure. They're still very much familiar territory, and they are probably some of the more faithful interpretations when it comes to screen to figure so far. You know, thinking about the Revelation figures in particular, a lot of those aren't exactly right. This is very close, and it makes for a pretty solid figure. I was really concerned about how this would actually work. Would he be stable? Would he actually move? And it does move pretty decently. So let's see what he can do. You know, see how he moves around. The head is a little limited, but he can look up. He can look down slightly. You don't really have any tilt, but you've got full rotation. The hair kind of gets in the way of any tilt that could be there. Arms out at the shoulders. They, of course, will rotate. You've got your bicep swivel. We've got double jointed elbows, but they're basically only singles in terms of range. They are, you know, basically just 90-degree bends. You do have forearm swivel here due to how these gauntlets are done. And then you've got hinges and rotation at the wrist. The hinges are pretty tight, which is actually a good thing considering how large the weapon is for this figure. Torso on this guy, he actually does move relatively well at the torso. I always have a big gripe with Masterverse figures is that diaphragm cut really doesn't do anything on most figures. But he can go backwards, he can go forward slightly, but it's mostly just back. But the fact that it does something like this works really well, and they stay. They don't rubber band back. And then you do have a little bit of shimmy there. Not much, but you have a true waist twist here also. So that's really helpful. Legs are going to go out about that far. They're going to kick forward a decent bit. I'm going to stress watching this because I can see it happening. This loincloth is a sort of rigid but flexible material, and this section right here is stressing when you kick the leg forward too far. So just kind of watch that. Kicks back all the way. You've got a thigh cut up there. We've got double jointed knees. And again, this guy's pinless. You know, I didn't mention that. He's pinless, just like, but that's normal for Masterverse. Knees have really good range. And then you've got rocker, which is okay down here, and you've got really good hinge at those ankles. Oh, and we've also got a boot cut rather here also. Pretty well hidden with that strap, forgot to mention that. So, you know, very par for the course. Like, he's not exactly different. He very much fits into the mold of Masterverse. Like, this is the same kind of joint structure. The only thing that's truly different for me is the fact that the ab area, the diaphragm cut, is very much functional in some ways. It's not perfect by any means, but it seems to work a little bit better, more like it should work compared to some of those older figures. And the rest of him is very par for the course. He is, of course, going to be a little limited at the arms. You know, these are technically doubles, but they aren't really like the bicep has a very small cut. So it's basically just enough to get you 90. But I think for such huge arms, it's not really unexpected. Visually is an area where I wasn't really worried about this guy. You know, He-Man in this show is, you know, as I've said, he is a very specific thing. It's a stylized interpretation. crazy proportions, really out there kind of design, big up top, small on the bottom. But from the minute I saw this figure, in the solicitation images, I kind of thought, that looks right. Like, it looks good. It looks very much like it should. And I'm happy to report that in hand, he looks damn good. This is probably, like I've already said, one of the more faithful interpretations from screen to toy in the Masterverse line. And I know some of the figures so far have not been from, anything. We've got New Eternia stuff that is supposed to be its own thing. But among the Revelation figures in particular, a lot of those are okay, but they don't always hit the mark. This looks like he jumped right out of the Netflix show, without a doubt. And I think they did a really solid job here. He is a weird design, and I keep saying weird, but I don't mean weird in a bad way. I mean weird in a different way. He's very much his own thing. He's different from the other He-Mans we've got. He's different from any He-Man we've got. Like, this is a weird-looking He-Man. Crazy monster gorilla arms, big barrel chest with that big harness with the red, sword H on the front. This sort of, almost like carbon fiber-looking suit that he's got on, which does look really good. There's texture to it. The sort of glowing belt buckle that he's got and sort of like futuristic, which very much works for the show. Boots and shin covers that he's got down here. I really, really think that they absolutely nailed the look here. It is a weird looking figure. Like, he's definitely going to stand out from everything else we've gotten, but it's a pretty cool design. The only thing I don't really like, and I don't know how they probably couldn't have really fixed this, is you've got miscolored hinges here because he's got blue up top on his hands. This is kind of driving me nuts just because I keep seeing it, but it's ultimately a very nitpicky thing. One interesting thing, though, about these hands is that you can see this sort of weird lump that he's got on his hand right here. It's to better hold the sword because of how heavy it is. They built in a support to the hand. So while it looks weird on its own, it is incredibly useful, and honestly a really cool thing for them to have added just to help him be a little bit more usable. So I really like him. I think he's an awesome looking figure. The head sculpt in particular is very much on point. In comparison, I'm going to use it again, in comparison to the Revelation He-Man that we got, which didn't look anything like the actual show counterpart. This looks just like our show He-Man. I think the head looks great. The paint is really clean and crisp. The hair looks really good. There's a little bit of like a swirliness to it to make it sort of like shine a little bit, which I think it looks good. And it's just a nice expression on this head sculpt. It's not, it's not super stoic. It has a little bit of a smile to it, but it very much fits in line with this show and kind of the theme of this character at times. So I think it's kind of crazy to say, but this might be one of the best He-Man figures we've gotten in this line so far. He's a goofy looking thing, but this is what that He-Man's supposed to look like. Now, of course, we've got to talk size comparisons. So here are a couple other figures within the same scale. So we've got our New Eternia He-Man on the right, and you can see that he's a lot taller. Like, this is not a humongously tall He-Man figure that we've got here. It's a just big figure. So he's big and bulky, but he's not as tall as a lot of the other males. And then we've got a Mythic Legions here with a custom He-Man head, just to give you an idea of what he looks like with a Legions. Let's move this aside, and here is Mezco Conan, which I think is a pretty good indicator because he's not much taller than Conan here. And then let's move the Mythic Legions aside, and here is a NECA Turtle, just to give you an idea of what he looks like with a smaller figure. And then we'll go one more for a Hasbro. We got to do a Hasbro figure just for their 112 stuff. Here is the one and only Speedball for comparison. You can see that they actually line up pretty good to the top of the hair almost. So our new He-Man, while he's big and bulky and beefy, he's not necessarily as tall as the other standard males in the Masterverse. Now, as far as accessories goes, this guy doesn't come with a great deal, but it comes with sort of the bare minimum for a He-Man, and for this He-Man in particular. So to start with, we get some extra hands. You get some gripping hands on him in the box. Gripping with the weird notch. Weird but functional, but it's really good. Works very well. And then we get, of course, some fists. Standard fists. Big, chunky fists. And then we get the Netflix CGI version's power sword, and this thing is huge. I mean, it is almost as tall as the figure itself. It is super wide, just like the figure. There's some nice metallic for the silver inlay for this gold, and then there's white all through it to make the rest of that pop, and it really makes the silver stand out in particular. It makes the whole thing kind of shine, really. He can, of course, he can hold it, like I mentioned, these notches help. So you basically just push it in there and it will secure it in place, and he holds it just fine. I mean, it's a big, heavy sword. It's got some size to it, but he can hold it really well. And he does have storage for it too. So there's a hole on the back and a peg on the sword, and it allows you to stow it on his back. So I'm very happy about that. I think it also just makes for a nice presentation. So while he doesn't have a lot of stuff, he kind of has the bare minimum, exactly what I really need just to have a He-Man figure. So yeah, overall, really happy with this figure, and mostly that comes down to the fact that I am super surprised that they pulled this off. Masterverse has been a really solid line, but it sways between great and just not great really, really often. This guy is very much on the great half of the line. I think they absolutely nailed this from just about every aspect. He does have some articulation limitations, but I'm not sure you're going to be surprised by that. He's a weird proportioned figure, but he's not much different than any other figure in this line, really. Where they truly nail it, though, is the look, the sculpt, the paint, just the overall attention to detail and the accuracy. Like, this looks like the Netflix CGI He-Man, and ultimately that's what's really exciting about it, is they really, really nailed the look. He doesn't have a ton of accessories, but what he has are exactly what you need, and they did certain things like the hand little grippy thing, the hole in the back, to make that sword a lot more functional rather than something that he just holds and sort of flops around. So that's going to do it for this look at the Masters of the Universe Masterverse Netflix CGI He-Man. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.